Icon is like a David Lynch film, or it's like Donnie Darko. If you've seen Donnie Darko, you kind of go, what was that about? And so I don't know, but I felt a bit teary at the end. You know, that's what Icon is like. You know, what goes on? It's a bit mad, and it's not linear, and it's lots of bombardment of visuals and soundscapes and theatre and poetics and crazy stuff. And I'd love to talk to you about what to do. I can't. Not enough time. But you kind of. You kind of, what was that about? But the idea is that we're trying to create a rupturous experience where something happens.
Just a few days after that, I was going down to a church that meets in a nightclub in Wales and spending a morning there with, I suppose, about 50 young adults who meet regularly in the club for discussion and worship and a certain amount of clubbing.
Emerging Christians are interested and deeply invested in culture, in technology, in the arts, in politics.
There are a group within the Emerging Church who have really got into issues of social justice and discovered that. The gospel is about care of the poor and the transformation of society. And that one of the things we've done with the gospel is by getting people to pray prayers to go into heaven, what we've done is we've separated people off from actually the gospel. You know, a relationship with Jesus means caring for our community and the poor. We've separated those two from each other. More and more I'm finding Christians that I've known over the years, they gravitate towards social justice issues, and that's where they're finding their home.
There was a very important report presented to our governing body, our synod, just around the time I became Archbishop, called Mission-Shaped Church, which laid out the vision for new mission initiatives that were not constrained by traditional patterns, not necessarily locked into the Sunday morning pattern of worship, and so on.
There's missional groups, people that would say to themselves, the word mission really fires them up, and that's their identity. They want people to still come to faith. There's a group of people who have deconverted and left church and think that by leaving church they've done something, and actually I don't think they've done anything missional at all. And that's a part of what happens within consumer culture. We like to read books on emerging church or mission and go to conferences on mission or read blogs about being missional, and write about and talk about on blogs the things that we don't like about church, and then we think we've done something different. And actually all we can end up doing is consuming our ideas of church, but never translate them into something different and something concrete.
At our worst, Emerging can be very reactionary and cynical towards inherited church, and I think that's a real risk we run.
I think a lot of them are just going to end up drifting out of fellowship in the church, and they're going to end up with a kind of private spirituality, and maybe a kind of an alienated spirituality that will really blunt the full impact their lives could have for the cause of Christ.
I think the Emergent Church does need to come to a place where it can more fully explain what they're about and what they mean, so people understand it more.
And there can be very much a cult of hip in Emerging, and you know, sort of the stars, and that's a bit annoying.
I think at times the theology gets a little too ambiguous, and the worship gets a little too ambiguous, and I think you can get to a point where you simplify things so much, or you make things so universal that they kind of lose their value.
Sometimes they tend to throw out everything that they consider to be like church, or like everything out of their previous experiences, that they end up losing a lot of important history.
After 10 years, and there's a lot of discussion going on, especially in the blog world at the minute, it has not produced communities that have seen significant numbers of people who aren't Christians become Christian. That's just a fact. That's not happening. And there are many people in the Emerging Church that are very happy with that, and would say, well, I don't even want that anymore. I used to want that, but I'm not interested. But there are some people, and I'd be one of those, that are saying, I'm not happy with that. I'm in a place where we want our community to be transformed, but we also want people to find relationship with Jesus. That's still on the agenda for us. And you'll find some big divergences within Emerging Church conversations going on there.
You don't just tear up what's been good and useful in the past. And this is where I often wish I'd never coined the phrase, but I talked years ago about a mixed economy church. And this is a phrase that has come back to haunt me. It's quoted at me all the time. But I meant by that, there is a perfectly good way of doing traditional church, inherited church. You know, there are parishes of the old style in England which are working brilliantly. Yet they don't reach everybody. You've got to do that well, and you've got to do the new things well. And the important word in both is well, doing them with excellence and commitment and a kind of compelling attractiveness. And I think that's one of the things that's helped us here. It's not as if we've come with a new program. Well, we've been doing everything wrong. Let's just start again with Emergent Church, and that's all we're interested in. There are lessons to be learned from the tradition, and there are lessons that traditional church has to take on board from Emergent Church.